In the world of wild boar hunting in Texas, there's an unspoken rule that everyone who works this land knows by heart. Until the animal is secured in the back of the truck, nothing is guaranteed. After countless large-scale trapping operations, I thought I had figured out every behavior of these wild hogs. I believed sturdy steel traps and the experience I'd gained from hundreds of successful captures meant everything would go exactly as planned. But nature always has a way of humbling anyone who becomes too confident. Today, a series of unexpected events, desperate escape attempts, and the explosive survival instincts of these wild animals turned what should have been a routine trap check into a heart-pounding battle. Every encounter tested not only my strength, but also my nerve, where a single moment of distraction could have led to serious danger. Early that morning, the cool Texas air was still filled with mist. I started my pickup truck and headed toward the trap line along the western boundary of the ranch, feeling relaxed. When I arrived at the first trap, I found that only a single hog had been caught. Thinking that loading one hog would be quick and easy, I walked over and opened the gate. But at the exact moment my guard was down, the wild hog suddenly launched itself straight into the air, trying to escape through the gap at the top of the trap. The leap was so explosive and unexpected that my heart nearly stopped. The 100-pound animal slammed into the steel panels with a deafening bang. Sweat instantly formed on my forehead. If the trap had been just a few inches lower, it would have cleared the fence and charged straight at me. That moment reminded me of one thing. Never underestimate an animal with nothing left to lose. Regaining my focus, I patiently guided the hog and successfully loaded it into the truck. Still trying to calm my nerves after the first incident, I drove toward the cattle pasture to check the next trap. The scene couldn't have been more different. The moment the hogs spotted me and my pickup approaching, they became violently agitated. The smell of sweet corn mixed with panic pushed them into a frenzy. Their piercing squeals echoed across the open pasture. Just a few minutes later, as I moved closer to position a portable panel, they became even more aggressive. They slammed themselves into the steel walls over and over, crashing into one another so violently that the entire trap shook as though the welds might give way. Standing only a thin layer of steel away from those razor-sharp tusks and furious eyes sent a chill down my spine. Their extreme aggression made one thing clear. They had become completely wild with fear. Faced with a situation too dangerous to handle safely using live capture methods, I had to make a difficult but necessary decision. The entire group of wild hogs was humanely dispatched and loaded onto the truck for processing. Looking at the animals lying still, I let out a long breath, feeling both regret and relief. After those tense moments, I continued north to another trap location. As I approached the next trap one, I noticed the hog inside was extraordinarily cautious. Instead of charging the fence, it stayed hidden in a dark corner, silently watching my every move. That quiet vigilance was somehow even more unsettling than blind aggression. I carefully backed up the truck, connected the trailer to the trap, and with patience and careful baiting, successfully guided the hog into the trailer. But the day's challenges weren't over yet. At another nearby location, I discovered that the next trap had caught only a single wild hog, and it was extremely agitated. Being alone seemed only to intensify its fear and aggression. As the afternoon faded, the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon. Then a notification from one of my trail cameras reported that another trap had been triggered deep in the woods after dark. With only the dim beam of a flashlight cutting through the darkness and the cold night air settling over the forest, I carefully made my way toward the final trap. Darkness surrounded me. The only sounds were insects in the brush and the heavy footsteps of the animal moving inside the trap. Every one of my senses remained on high alert as I worked to finish the day's final task safely. Back at the ranch house, with the clock nearing midnight, I sank into a chair on the porch and wrapped my hands around a hot cup of coffee, trying to warm fingers that were still trembling from exhaustion and the lingering rush of adrenaline. Today's episode was far more than an ordinary day of wild hog trapping. It was a powerful reminder to stay humble in the face of nature. Wild hogs may be considered destructive pests, but they possess remarkable strength and an incredible instinct for survival. A single moment of overconfidence can result in injury or worse. I realized that the battle to protect the Texas ranch is never truly over. But every unexpected encounter and every heart-stopping moment makes a rancher stronger and more experienced. We don't hunt out of cruelty. We hunt because protecting the land is our responsibility. A job that demands both a courageous heart and a calm mind, no matter what nature throws our way. Looking at fields torn apart by deep furrows, fruit trees ripped out by the roots, and irrigation pipes chewed into pieces, the frustration of a Texas farmer had reached its breaking point. The destruction caused by invasive wild hogs was not only draining money and years of hard work, but also pushing farmers to the edge as they woke up each morning to find fresh damage across their land. Unable to stand by any longer, Nick decided to launch a large-scale operation, deploying his most advanced trapping systems in a determined effort to restore peace to his ranch. The campaign demanded careful preparation from the very beginning. Along the overgrown edges of the property, Nick used brush cutters and hand tools to clear thick grass and brush, creating open, level ground for installing heavy-duty steel corral traps. As night fell, the sweet scent of fermented corn began doing its job. At the main trap site near a sandy ridge, a large sounder of wild hogs was irresistibly drawn toward the bait, crossing the trap entrance without suspicion. Within seconds, the automatic trigger engaged, capturing an impressively large number of hogs inside the enclosure. Meanwhile, at another section of the ranch, a second group of destructive hogs had also been lured into a different trap during the night. The sharp clang of steel echoed through the darkness as the smart trap door slammed shut, sealing them inside. At first light, Nick started his morning inspection of the trap network. He arrived at the first trap shortly after sunrise. To transport such a large number of animals, he carefully connected a sturdy steel loading tunnel from the trap entrance directly to the bed of his pickup truck. The moment the hogs spotted him, they became highly agitated, charging repeatedly into the steel panels. After patiently guiding the animals, Nick successfully moved the entire group through the tunnel, completing the loading process safely. Nick then drove to the second trap location. His arrival once again triggered a frantic reaction from the trap hogs. To stop the ongoing destruction they had caused across the ranch, Nick quickly carried out the necessary harvesting procedures. At another large corral trap deeper inside the property, yet another sizable group of wild hogs had been successfully captured. Nick set up a professional loading system by connecting a portable holding cage directly to the trap entrance. He then carefully guided the hogs into the truck, completing another highly successful operation before resetting the trap for future use. As the day progressed, the operation became even more intense. Nick returned to the trap near the sandy ridge, where the large herd had been captured overnight. The moment he stepped out of the truck, the trap hogs erupted into frantic panic, charging the fence while letting out loud, aggressive squeals. Because of the danger they posed to both people and nearby livestock, Nick made the decision to humanely dispatch the animals to ensure safety. He then loaded the carcasses onto his truck for transport to the processing area. Next came the single catch trap positioned in the clearing he had prepared earlier. Although the trap had worked perfectly, this time it had captured only one clever boar that had slipped in to feed alone. Nick calmly connected a smaller portable holding cage to the main trap, then successfully guided the lone animal into the transport cage. The final operation of the day took place at a trap beside a cornfield. As the boar noticed Nick approaching, it panicked, charging around the enclosure while squealing loudly. Relying on years of experience, Nick carefully guided the animal onto the truck, successfully securing the final destructive animal before heading home. As the evening sun cast long shadows across the green fields of Texas, the deafening squeals of the wild hogs faded into silence, allowing peace to return to the ranch once again. Looking at the empty traps that had done their job so effectively and the trucks filled with the day's harvest, the tension on Nick's face finally gave way to a quiet smile of relief. The overwhelming frustration caused by relentless agricultural damage had finally been answered with determined action and meaningful results. Once again, the battle proved that no matter how destructive, intelligent, or aggressive invasive wild hogs may be, they cannot overcome careful planning, modern technology, unwavering determination, and the resilience of a hard-working Texas farmer. With the ranch finally secured, the land was once again ready for another promising growing season. We are a rapid response wildlife control team operating in the state of Texas. The uninvited guests only show up after the sun goes down. They move in groups, tearing up underground irrigation systems and ripping through topsoil in search of roots. Yes, feral hogs. The ranch owner had tried everything, but these animals are too smart. They learn fast, they adapt, and they always find the weak point. That's when we get called in. First rule, shut down all current deterrents. No noise, no small cage traps, no hunting dogs. We need the sounder to believe this place is no longer a threat. The first location sits deep in the woods. Dense grass, limited visibility. At 7:22 p.m., the camera pings. The automatic feeder has done its job. A group moves in. I watch through the live feed. No other wildlife. No stray livestock. This is it. The gate drops fast. So fast they don't even realize they're trapped until it's already over. Then comes the chaos. Panic erupts inside the trap. Bodies collide. Steel echoes through the forest. For a brief moment, the entire area feels like it's shaking. And then, control. The second site is wide and open. Bait is concentrated at the center. At exactly 7:37 p.m., the second group arrives. This time, I have to be more careful. Open terrain means higher risk. If anyone or any vehicle passes through, I must delay the drop. But the area stays clear. Not a second wasted. I trigger the system remotely. Two 12-foot gates slam down in perfect sync. But the third location, that's the real test. A large sounder. They circle for a long time. The smaller ones enter first. The bigger ones stay out, watching, calculating. I stay locked in my seat, eyes fixed on the phone screen. Not a second away. My heartbeat rises. Breathing tightens. It takes until 2 a.m. Patience pays off. The entire group is finally inside, feeding under the soft glow of infrared. I send the command. The gates drop. Instant chaos. The sheer number of animals makes the steel enclosure shake violently in the night. But once the lock engages, not a single one gets out. What looks like a clean result in one night isn't luck. It's a complete shift in strategy. Phase 1 is always scouting and setup. We identify travel routes, habitual paths, and place monitoring stations discreetly. Once locations are confirmed, it's time to choose the trap. We don't do things the old way anymore. Too slow, too costly, too risky. We use modern modular corral systems. With this setup, one person can deploy rigid panels, lock them in place, and raise a 12-foot heavy-duty drop gate using a manual winch. All in under 20 minutes. The key is speed. The gate drops instantly. The goal isn't just to catch some, it's to contain all. Once the structure is up, we install the system. One automatic feeder inside, one solar-powered ice camera mounted high from that moment on. Everything runs remotely, 24/7 through a smartphone. Anywhere, anytime. When a camera confirms the entire sounder is inside, one tap sends a signal. The gate drops immediately, and if a person or livestock enters the area, we delay. No panic, no risk. Everything is controlled down to the second. Wildlife control isn't about force or luck. It's about strategy, technology, and understanding animal behavior. With remote systems and real-time monitoring, we remove unnecessary human interference, ensure maximum safety for the surrounding environment, and solve the problem at its root.
How about this boat paddle? Hip, hip, get turned. Hip, hip, hip.
Three long months under the blazing sun and pouring rain, carefully nurturing every green shoot and tending every row of cassava and corn with endless sweat and hope. Yet in just one night, all the hard work of the Texas farmer was reduced to a devastated battlefield. A sounder of feral hogs mercilessly tore through the fields, rooting up the soil and trampling leaves and stalks into ruins just to dig out a few tender roots beneath the ground. Looking at the destroyed farmland, the farmer's heart sank with grief. This was no longer an ordinary effort to stop crop damage. It had become a campaign of retribution to protect their livelihood and defend the pride of those who live by the land. To deal with these destructive animals that had grown accustomed to raiding crops, Nick knew anger would solve nothing. He began the operation with a patient baiting strategy. First, he scattered sweet corn around the trap site every day without setting the trap, allowing the feral hogs to develop a natural feeding routine and gradually lose their caution. When the timing was right, the trap was finally set and activated. The feral hogs filed into the enclosure one after another to feast on the bait without the slightest suspicion. Snap! The trap slammed shut with absolute precision. Nick immediately arrived and quickly dispatched the destructive feral hogs, bringing this group's rampage across the farmland to an end. At another corner of the property bordering the woods, Nick set another trap and spread fresh bait. The feral hogs were soon drawn in by the sweet scent of food. As darkness fell, the smart trap activated automatically, allowing him to capture the entire sounder of cunning feral hogs. The battle reached its climax late that night. Through a thermal imaging camera, Nick watched the massive corral trap slam shut in the darkness. Early the next morning, he rushed to the scene. To handle such a large group of feral hogs, Nick began installing a sloped wire mesh loading chute that connected the trap directly to the bed of his pickup truck. After relentless pressure, the panicked feral hogs finally ran straight through the chute and successfully loaded into the truck. To save time, Nick launched a drone to survey the ranch and discovered another sounder of feral hogs had already been caught in the next trap. However, the moment Nick approached the trap with his utility vehicle, the trapped animals became extremely agitated, repeatedly ramming the steel panels while letting out loud grunts. The roar of the engine only frightened them further, sending them racing around the enclosure in search of an escape. All that remained for Nick and his team was to quickly secure the animals before heading home. In addition to capturing entire sounders, Nick also had to deal with the most cunning and aggressive solitary hogs. In a field of tall grass, he spread corn to lure in a true monster of the night. The result was astonishing as he successfully trapped a gigantic boar. After repeatedly slamming into the steel cage, the boar had injured its snout, leaving it bloodied and extremely aggressive, ready to charge anyone who came near. Remaining calm, Nick skillfully used food to lure the boar into a smaller holding cage, then safely loaded the massive boar onto his truck. At another trap near a cornfield, Nick discovered a large solitary feral hog caught inside. He carefully connected the trap to a portable holding cage, guided the feral hog into the smaller cage for easier handling, then pushed the cage onto the bed of his pickup truck. Finally, for the last stubborn feral hog, Nick carefully backed his pickup truck into position to connect the wire mesh loading chute directly to the trap. With just a few firm movements to drive it forward, the feral hog ran straight up into the truck bed safely and cleanly. Beneath the brilliant golden sun of the Texas plains, the sound of the pickup truck carrying its hard-earned catch gradually faded into the horizon. Looking back at the fields that had been ripped apart, Nick knew that losses were an unavoidable part of choosing a life tied to this rugged land. Yet the greatest lesson from this cleanup operation was the unbreakable spirit of the farmer. 3 months of hard work can be destroyed in a single night, but no wild animal can ever crush the human will. Through careful preparation, patient trapping, and courage during close encounters, farmers can clear their land of these destructive invaders, restore the rich green landscape of their ranches, and continue planting the next season's abundant harvests. At dawn, the first lights spread across the wide plains of Texas. Riding in our familiar Ford F-250 pickup truck, Nick and I set out for another busy day of work. Here in Texas, feral hogs are a true nightmare. They destroy hundreds of acres of corn, tear up pastures, and pose a direct threat to livestock water sources. Our mission today was to inspect the network of smart traps scattered throughout the ranch. Our first stop was a trap set along the edge of the woods, where the ranch meets the wild backcountry. Nick had installed this trap several days earlier. The moment we shut off the truck's engine, a chorus of harsh squeals and the clang of steel echoed through the trees. The first trap had captured an entire sounder of aggressive feral hogs. As I walked closer, the hogs caught our scent and immediately panicked. They slammed themselves against the heavy steel bars, their eyes blazing and tusks clacking, without hesitation. And to prevent them from damaging the trap, Nick and I quickly drew our rifles and dispatched them cleanly. We loaded the carcasses into the bed of the pickup and continued on our route. We drove toward the central fields. From a distance, a massive circular corral trap came into view. What amazed us was the unbelievable number of feral hogs packed inside. They were crowded shoulder to shoulder, climbing over one another in the confined space. With a catch this large, handling them one by one simply wasn't practical. We backed the pickup truck, already fitted with a large steel transport cage, up to the trap entrance. Nick then connected a portable wire mesh tunnel that linked the trap directly to the cage mounted on the truck. Once the trap gate was opened and the hogs were pressured from behind, they had only one way to go. They rushed through the tunnel one after another, running straight into the steel cage on the truck exactly as intended. It was a perfect combination of practical engineering and years of trapping experience. The truck continued toward an area of dense grassland where the vegetation stood waist high. The third trap brought another surprise. This time, it wasn't a mixed group of hogs. It was an entire feral hog family. Inside the trap was a pair of adult feral hogs. The boar's raised mane made it look especially intimidating, while numerous striped piglets crowded around them. As difficult as it was to see, Texas regulations are very clear. These invasive feral hogs reproduce at an astonishing rate, and releasing them would only cause further destruction to the ecosystem. Nick and I worked together smoothly, dispatched the entire group, and quickly collected the harvest. Since we were already in the area and the morning had fully broken, Nick decided to set a fifth trap along a game trail near a water source. We spread corn as bait, armed the automatic trigger mechanism, and moved on. To our surprise, when we returned later that afternoon to check it, the trap had already sprung. This time there were only 2 medium-sized feral hogs, but we were still pleased with the result. Every hog removed meant another piece of farmland protected. But the highlight of the day awaited us at the fourth trap, located deep inside the main ranch near the livestock feed storage area. As the truck rolled closer, both Nick and I were stunned. The trap was absolutely packed with feral hogs, the largest catch we had seen all season. Dozens of hogs of every size were crammed into the enclosure, squealing frantically as the overpowering stench filled the air. Looking at the scene, the excitement of a successful catch quickly turned into concern. The feral hog population in Texas was growing far too fast. They had become bold enough to wander right up to the doorsteps of local ranchers. We might have caught this many tonight, but how many more would arrive tomorrow? Nick tightened his grip on the steering wheel, fully aware that this battle was far from over. As the sun set, We headed to the western edge of the woods to set our sixth and final trap of the day before returning home for a short rest. When we came back later that night, darkness had completely covered the ranch. The headlights of the Ford F-250 cut through the night and illuminated the steel trap. Another sounder of feral hogs had been captured beneath the Texas moon. Wearing our headlamps, we carried out the familiar processing routine once again. Late that night, our Ford F-250, loaded with the day's harvest, rolled back into the garage. It had been a long, exhausting day, but an exceptionally successful one for both Nick and me. Although the invasion of feral hogs continues to grow more aggressive each year, Texas ranchers have no intention of backing down. With determination, smart trapping systems, and an unwavering spirit, they will continue doing everything they can to protect their land and the fruits of their hard work. The sun had not yet risen above the pine trees when I left the farm to begin checking the monitoring sites we had set up the evening before. Early mornings in Texas always carry a sense of peace, but years of experience have taught me that while people are asleep, the forest is often at its busiest. Every morning, what I look forward to most is not a particular outcome, but the new data that helps explain how the wild boars moved throughout the night. The first site was located in a small clearing deep within the pine forest. Even from a distance, I could see countless fresh tracks and patches of newly rooted soil. As I walked closer, I couldn't hide my surprise at the level of activity recorded there. The scene made it clear that this remained one of the herd's primary travel routes. I spent quite some time examining the direction of the tracks, the entry and exit paths, and the condition of the ground before carefully documenting the entire site. Those seemingly minor details form the foundation for understanding how the boars use this area and help us assess their impact on both the forest and the surrounding grasslands. Around 7 o'clock, as the morning sunlight filtered through the pine trees, I arrived at the second monitoring site. Contrary to my expectations, the area was surprisingly quiet. Only a handful of fresh signs of activity had appeared overnight. To be honest, I felt a little disappointed because just a few days earlier this location had been covered with tracks. But after taking a closer look, I realized this could also be a positive sign. It was possible that the boars had shifted to a different travel route, or that this area was no longer serving as a major gathering point. In wildlife monitoring, a low level of activity is not always bad news. Sometimes it reflects broader changes within the ecosystem. Leaving the pine forest behind, I continued to the third monitoring site near a narrow stretch of grassland. The results there were much the same. The data was not as extensive as I had expected, but it added another important piece to the overall picture. As I compared maps collected over several days, I began noticing a pattern. The wild boars seemed to be spreading out rather than concentrating in just a few fixed locations. That realization left me both curious and eager to see whether the trend would continue in the days ahead. By the time the sun was nearly overhead, I reached the fourth monitoring site. The midday Texas heat made traveling more demanding, yet the surroundings remained remarkably peaceful, with towering oak trees and wide open grasslands stretching into the distance. Once again, The data showed activity levels far lower than those recorded in previous weeks. At first, I was disappointed by the lack of new information, but I soon began looking at it from a more optimistic perspective. If this trend continues over time, it could indicate that the pressure wild boars place on this area is gradually decreasing. While more time will be needed before drawing any firm conclusions, it is certainly a promising sign worth monitoring. After midday, the journey suddenly took on an entirely different rhythm as I arrived at the 5th monitoring site. The freshly overturned soil and the maze of overlapping tracks immediately told me that the area had been extremely active during the night. The amount of evidence recorded there far exceeded anything I had expected. Morgan, who was accompanying me, pointed to the map and explained that this location sits between a water source and a recently harvested field, making it a natural crossroads for multiple travel routes. At that moment, I realized that a difference of just a few hundred meters in the landscape can dramatically influence how wildlife uses its habitat. As the afternoon sun softened and long shadows stretched across the ground, we arrived at the final monitoring site of the day. Even though Texas afternoons always carry a special kind of quiet, the evidence before us revealed a night filled with intense wild boar activity. Fresh tracks, flattened patches of grass, and damp, freshly rooted soil spoke louder than words. I stood silently for a few moments, taking in the entire scene before recording the final observations. On the drive back, I reflected on the day's journey and realized that the greatest value did not lie in any single location, but in the way they all connected. Some areas showed a clear decline in activity, while others remained remarkably active. Those contrasts are what help us better understand the movement patterns of wild boars and make more objective assessments of conditions across the landscape. Every survey ends with new questions, and perhaps that is exactly what makes this work so rewarding to continue. In Texas, wild boars are causing serious damage to farms and agricultural fields. They emerge at night, tear up cultivated land, destroy crops, and can wipe out months of farmers' hard work in just a few hours. To deal with this problem, we deployed a series of traps in the areas where wild boars are most active. Today, we will check each trap and see what results the operation has produced after a night of activity. The first 3 traps I checked today did not produce the results we had hoped for, although all 3 were triggered during the night. Each trap managed to hold only a single wild boar. After collecting the trapped animals, the disappointment was clear on everyone's face. Given the density of wild boars in this area, we had expected much better results. It seemed that the larger sounders had changed their travel routes, or perhaps the current trap locations were no longer as effective as before. So instead of continuing to wait, we decided to move to new locations in the hope of finding where the boars were actually concentrating their activity. The first trap was placed in a field of tall grass, about 5 miles west of the trap location from the previous day. Based on fresh signs discovered in the area, we believe this could be a new travel route for the wild boars. And it took only one night to prove that theory. When we returned to inspect the trap this morning, it had been triggered. Inside, an entire group of wild boars was packed together, desperately trying to escape. After the series of disappointments earlier, this was exactly the result we had been waiting for. Without wasting any time, we began collecting the catch and processing all the trap boars before continuing on to the next location. Because a large number of wild boars have been trapped at the first location, it took us quite a while to collect and process them. By the time we continued to the second trap, which was located quite a distance away, the afternoon was already coming to an end. This trap had been set in an area with very high wild boar activity, so the outcome was almost exactly what we expected. As soon as we arrived, it was clear that the trap had been triggered and was holding a large number of wild boars inside. After a quick inspection of the site, we began collecting the catch. These consecutive successes showed that the decision to relocate the traps had been absolutely correct, because we had finally found where the large groups of boars were truly active. By the time we reached the final trap, darkness had completely fallen. After a long day of traveling and working from one location to another, everyone was exhausted. But that feeling quickly disappeared when our lights illuminated the trap ahead. Inside was a large group of wild boars crowded together, searching for a way to escape. The trap had performed even better than expected, delivering the best result of the entire day. Even though it was already dark, the team could not hide their excitement and immediately got to work collecting the catch. After the disappointments at the start of the day and the risky decision to move the traps to new locations, all of our efforts had finally been rewarded. as the last wild boars were collected and we left the area under the cover of darkness. Today's results proved one thing very clearly. Sometimes the problem is not the trap itself, but where the trap is placed. After a series of failures in the morning, the decision to boldly move into a new area helped us relocate the boar's travel route and achieve results far beyond our expectations. Every boar captured today means one less threat to the fields that would otherwise be damaged in the nights ahead. The battle against wild boars in Texas is far from over, but at least today, the traps fulfilled their purpose, and farmers have one more reason to feel confident as the growing season approaches. If one night an entire herd of wild boars suddenly stormed into your farm, what would you do? Not just a few scattered animals, but a massive group moving together, destroying everything in their path. That is exactly the situation I'm facing. I specialize in handling and controlling invasive wild boar populations, and this time, the problem is no longer as simple as before. The tracks they left behind showed something alarming. Not only are they growing in number, they've also become far more cautious and unpredictable. So how do you stop an entire herd at once? Will these traps be enough to hold them? Or will they be the ones outsmarting me instead? I started by placing the trap directly along the clearest trail the herd regularly used. The steel cage was secured tightly, and bait was carefully scattered deeper inside, step by step, to make everything feel as natural as possible. Everything had to be perfect, because even the smallest unusual sign would keep them from entering. As night fell, the area sank into silence, but not long after, the herd appeared. They followed the scent of food and slowly moved into the trap. Then the gate slammed shut. The sound echoed sharply through the darkness. Instantly, the entire herd erupted into chaos, crashing violently inside the cramped space, desperately searching for a way out. The next morning, we couldn't afford to wait any longer. As soon as daylight broke, the whole team headed straight for the trap location. Even from a distance, we could already hear the noise coming from inside. As we approached, the wild boars were still reacting aggressively. Without wasting time, we immediately began the collection process, controlling each step carefully to remove the entire group quickly and decisively. The next trap was placed right along the forest edge, an area where the wild boars regularly emerged each night to feed. Everything was prepared quickly before we left, allowing the trap to sit quietly in the darkness. That night, the trap was triggered. The next morning, the moment I returned, I realized the situation was far more serious than the previous captures. The number of wild boars packed inside was enormous. They filled the entire cage, shoving against one another, moving violently, constantly slamming into the steel frame. The atmosphere instantly became tense. There were simply too many. We needed a way to handle them quickly and efficiently. A bulldozer was brought in, slowly approaching the trap while the herd inside continued thrashing violently. Every movement had to be calculated carefully. One group at a time, they were loaded onto the transport vehicle. The third trap was placed along the western edge of the forest, where the herd frequently traveled out to feed before returning deeper into the woods. After everything was set, I left the trap overnight, and just as expected, they entered and triggered it under the cover of darkness. The next morning, when I returned, the situation was obvious immediately. Inside, the herd was trapped tightly together, moving frantically within the confined space. This time, there were no machines to assist us. Everything had to be done manually. I handled it one step at a time, carefully, decisively. There was no room for mistakes. Each animal was controlled and collected by hand. It took far longer, but it ensured everything stayed under control. When the final boar was removed from the trap, silence slowly returned to the area once again. Another location completed exactly as planned. The fourth trap was placed deep inside a clearing surrounded by dense pine forest, a hidden location enclosed by thick rows of trees. Everything was prepared carefully before we left. But this time, the night camera malfunctioned, meaning none of the events during the night were recorded. The next morning, when we returned, the atmosphere already felt different. Even from far away, I could sense something was wrong. And as we approached the trap, the sight in front of us genuinely stopped me cold. Inside were not ordinary wild boars. These were massive animals, huge bodies, heavy movements filled with raw power. The trap itself looked smaller than ever as they shoved against its steel frame. Every movement created deep, heavy sounds echoing through the silent forest. When the final trap was finally cleared, the forest slowly returned to its natural silence. Looking back at everything that had happened, I knew this was no ordinary trapping operation. From massive herds to gigantic individuals hidden deep inside the woods, everything revealed one thing clearly. This area was far more complex than anything I'd faced before. We managed to regain control, but it was obvious. This would not be the last time.